Good evening. In what's being seen as a major climb down by Donald Trump, the president has announced a temporary end to the partial US government shutdown, which has lasted for 35 days. He's reached a deal with congressional leaders, but without securing the billions of dollars he demanded to build a wall on the southern border with Mexico. 800,000 federal workers have gone without pay, and there was mounting public and political pressure on Mr. Trump to act. But the president warned that if there was no agreement with Congress by February the 15th, then the government could be shut down again. Meanwhile, one of his long-standing allies has appeared in court charged with lying and witness tampering in the inquiry over Russian meddling in the 2016 election. From Washington, here's our North America editor, John Sopel.
Friday morning, and the extraordinary sight of the main domestic airport in New York at a virtual standstill. The government shutdown meaning there weren't enough air traffic controllers to keep planes flying safely. Day 35 of the longest shutdown in history, and 800,000 workers were missing another payday. But today, however he sought to portray it otherwise, the president caved.
I am very proud to announce today that we have reached a deal to end the shutdown and reopen the federal government.
The shutdown was triggered when the president said unless there was $5 billion for his border wall, he'd keep the government closed indefinitely. Then he said he wanted a down payment. But now the federal government will reopen without a cent having been pledged.
And there's fresh fruit, hot coffee.
As millions were affected and food lines grew, so the pressure piled up on the president. Polls showed that he was overwhelmingly being blamed for the shutdown.
Disagreement in policy should never be a reason to shut down government, really shouldn't, especially, again, for a period of time that has an impact on the paychecks. I'm sad it has taken this long. I'm glad that we've come to a conclusion today as to how we go forward.
This has been a rough few days for the president. He got himself into an arm wrestle with the Speaker of the House, 78-year-old Nancy Pelosi, and lost. His demands for border wall funding haven't been met. And this morning, one of his longtime associates and close confidants was arrested as part of the Mueller investigation. Roger Stone, provocateur, flamboyant, lifelong Republican operative, specialist in dirty tricks, and one-time aide to Richard Nixon. And as of 4 o'clock this morning, when the FBI moved in mob-handed, the latest person to be arrested in the Mueller investigation into collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. After Stone's court appearance, he emerged the very picture of defiance, almost emulating Richard Nixon.
I will plead not guilty to these charges. I will defeat them in court. I believe this is a politically motivated investigation. I am troubled by the political motivations of the prosecutors.
His indictment containing details of texts he'd sent that read as though they were taken from The Godfather or The Sopranos. To one he writes, "You are a rat, a stoolie, you backstab your friends. I am so ready. Let's get it on. Prepare to die," expletive. The indictment alleges that Stone was the key conduit between Russia, Julian Assange's WikiLeaks, and the release of thousands of stolen emails from the Democratic National Committee, deeply damaging to Hillary Clinton. Today, the White House was saying, so what?
This has nothing to do with the president, has nothing to do with the White House.
But though the president protests that the Mueller investigation is a hoax and a witch hunt, more and more key figures have been snared over their contacts with Russia and the lies they told to cover their tracks. John Sopel, BBC News.
A BBC investigation has found that the Home Office is struggling to cope with a surge in asylum claims from newly arrived migrants. Leaked documents show that towards the end of last year, there were the highest levels of asylum requests since 2015. In this exclusive investigation, our correspondent Colin Campbell has travelled across Europe to meet some of those trying to get to Britain. His report begins near Ostend on the Belgian coast.
We're secretly filming at a service station in Belgium near Ostend. A lookout keeps watch while a man breaks in. 4 migrants climb on board, the sleeping driver oblivious. The next day, we're at Caen in northern France. These men are sprinting after UK-bound lorries in broad daylight. Well, this is happening here every single day, and as far as we can see, it's going unchallenged by French police. Why do you want to go to England? Why not stay here in France?
The France, they know sleeping only for the street, and they don't have anything. Their life is no better for me.
From France, we travel to northern Spain. Bilbao is another transit destination. These are Albanian migrants trying to get to Britain on ferries that sail to Portsmouth. Is this where you guys live? Yeah. They're camping on a hillside opposite the port. How are you trying to get to England?
With all our power. Into the trucks, lorries, vans, everything. Our clothes,
These are economic migrants, but leaked Home Office documents we've seen from the National Asylum Intake Unit suggest there's deep concern about rising asylum applications. The document says asylum intake for October, November, December 2018 hit the highest levels since 2015, and that delays in processing asylum claims are unacceptably high. It risks reputational damage to the Home Office and asylum process. The Home Office told us they do not comment on leaked documents, but insist their performance on asylum has remained robust and that applications have been broadly stable for the last 18 months. Where are you from? You're Iranian. At the end of last year, I filmed these people crossing the channel. That's one way of getting into the UK, but many more arrive hidden in lorries.
There are 2 million inbound lorries a year coming through into the UK, so that's potentially 2 million opportunities for people smugglers to get migrants onto lorries. It's a much bigger problem, it's a much larger scale, and we should be worried about it.
Back in Belgium, we told the driver of the truck we'd been filming about his human cargo. Do you speak English? You got 4 migrants in your back. 4. But others are succeeding. This is Sussex, migrants filmed by a Spanish driver who have successfully arrived in England. Colin Campbell, BBC.
Good evening. Roger Stone was one of the first people to tell Donald Trump he should run for president. A veteran political strategist and self-described dirty trickster, he is tonight the latest and closest Trump associate to be charged with a crime. He denies lying to Congress, witness tampering and obstructing an investigation. The president condemned his arrest, but he arguably had more pressing things on his mind in the form of a major retreat on the US government shutdown. He has been telling everyone who would listen for weeks that it would continue until he got his funding for the wall with Mexico. But today he brought it all to an end, if only for 3 weeks, a period during which he said Democrats and Republicans should work together to forge a lasting deal and find the money for the wall.
Just before dawn, heavily armed FBI agents surrounded the house of Roger Stone and then took him into custody. It was the latest move by the Mueller investigators, who are continuing to probe links between the Trump campaign and the Kremlin. Amid chaotic scenes at a nearby Florida courthouse, he emerged utterly defiant. He denied that he was ever an intermediary between WikiLeaks and the Trump campaign, and he ridiculed the charges that he now faces.
I am falsely accused of making false statements during my testimony to the House Intelligence Committee. That is incorrect. Any error I made in my testimony would be both immaterial and without intent.
He then promised never to turn on the president that he so admires.
There is no circumstance whatsoever under which I will bear false witness against the president, nor will I make up lies to ease the pressure on myself.
Roger Stone is one of the most controversial and exuberant figures in American politics, an advisor to many Republicans.
Those who say I have no principles are losers. Those are bitter losers.
He was the subject of a Netflix documentary last year.
I'm an agent provocateur.
He even has a tattoo of Richard Nixon on his back. After Trump's election, he appeared to be deeply evasive when I asked him about Russia's role.
Do you accept that Russia sought to interfere in the election of 2016?
There's no evidence to that effect that would hold up in an American court. What we have is conjecture.
Although Trump and Stone go back many years, today the president's team is emphasizing something else.
What I do know is that this has nothing to do with the president, has nothing to do with the White House.
It all raises the question of whether Mueller has information that puts the president himself in imminent legal and political jeopardy. But conveniently, Trump had other news to announce.
We have reached a deal to end the shutdown and reopen the federal government.
He did pivot today and announce a temporary end to the paralysis gripping Washington. But then he warned that the option of declaring a national emergency to fund the border wall was still on the table.
If we don't get a fair deal from Congress, the government will either shut down on February 15th again, or I will use the powers afforded to me under the laws and the Constitution of the United States to address this emergency.
So for the White House, this is a day of defeats, a climb down over the shutdown, and the extraordinary sight of FBI agents swarming around the house of one of the president's oldest political allies.
And Robert joins us from Washington. Robert, Donald Trump has spent a lot of time telling the world he's great at deals. This doesn't look like a particularly good one from his point of view, does it?
No, I think that's absolutely right. Look, Democrats, Tom, are trying hard not to be too jubilant or to gloat tonight. That's not a good look for them. But I think across this town there is a very broad assessment. This is a tactical victory for the Democrats, and in particular for the new House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, and by implication a tactical defeat for President Trump. Because after all, after 34 days of a government shutdown, it's now opening up without a dollar more for the border wall along the frontier with Mexico, let alone the $5.7 billion that Trump was demanding. And so the political risk, I think, for the president is pretty clear tonight, that it's not just that his critics are angry, they were before and they are now, but it's that his core supporters have a sense of betrayal, that he's caved in on what was his core election promise. One of his cheerleaders wrote on Twitter that Trump is now the biggest wimp ever to serve as president of the United States, giving you a sense of the feeling of betrayal on the populist right. And you combine this, Tom, with the Mueller team now encircling the White House and charging some of those who are close to the president. And it's clear today has been a bleak day for the president, even perhaps a humiliating one.